So good afternoon, students. I was having some issue with internet today. So luckily, I think it worked out now. I'm able to connect to the internet now. So that took me a bit of time to figure out what was happening. Okay. So in the last class, we finished talking about the unit 9.4. So in this class, we are going to begin with the unit 9.1. Okay. Another very important unit for the exam. If you see the past questions, 9.1 is one area where we get some specific questions that are being asked. And also, this is something that adds a lot of weightage in terms of applications of anthropology, especially applications of physical anthropology. So look into the syllabus. So if you see that human genetics methods and application, what it says. So the focus of this unit is to teach us methods and applications part of the human genetics are in part of physical anthropology here. So all these components that we started discussing before, like chromosomal abnormalities and population genetics, they come under this. Because here we are studying specifically genetic component associated with humans. Okay. And what role does genetics play in understanding humans? So specifically in 9.1, focus is on the methods part. Like I was telling you briefly some of these methods in the other classes. When you learn about chromosomal problems, genetic diseases, how do you diagnose them? How do you study humans is the main focus of this unit. And in the exam also, sometimes general questions are coming, asking specifically for the methods that are used in studying man. Explain certain methods with examples. That is how questions are coming in the exam, or they're asking specifically the question. So first, I'll read a couple of questions. Don't have to note down anything, but get the idea about what needs to be studied as part of this unit. Okay. So like one question that came in 2017 is briefly describe the various methods used in genetic study of man. Briefly describe the various methods used in the study of man. So directly the scope of the topic, but we have to choose different methods falling under different specific areas. Okay, you will understand that later. But looking, as you see from the question, they're asking us to know the methods that are used to study humans. And then specific questions are asked. Otherwise, this question had come a couple of times. Otherwise, specific questions. DNA technology in medicine. How is DNA technology, genetic engineering and related technologies, how are they used in medicine? Okay, 10 marker, a short note came before. And more recently, we have been seeing questions on what is called molecular anthropology. It is not specified in the syllabus, but it falls under this 9.1, which is called molecular anthropology. Basically, studying at the level of molecules, like DNA, mainly it is talking about DNA, or maybe RNA, maybe protein. At that level, what type of technologies are being developed? This is mostly current affairs part. Molecular anthropology part, 2018 question. And what do you understand by immunogenetics? So this is one subtopic in the syllabus, and twin method in human genetics. So questions either are asked briefly about the overall idea about this unit, or specific questions are being asked. So syllabus is, as you notice in the syllabus can be subdivided into methods for study of genetic principles in man and family study, individual studies or family level studies. Okay, what approaches we need to take? Examples of methods they have given. Pedigree analysis. Pedigree. Did we talk about pedigree before in the class? We discussed about pedigrees, right? I didn't give you details, but I told you pedigree is family studies, family history we collect. If someone is suffering from a particular problem, we collect his family history. Where did we talk about pedigrees? In what topic did we discuss pedigrees in the last unit?
Chromosomal aberrations.
Chromosomal abnormalities, especially genetic counseling part, genetic screening part, we said, and even in the gene mapping part. We learned that so positioning of the gene can be studied by collecting history of families. Such studies are called pedigree studies. So pedigree analysis, twin studies, there is a well-known, of course, has its own limitations. Twin studies, studying twins to understand inheritance of certain characteristics. Okay, so pedigree, twin study, and connected to twin study, we also learn about foster child method, co-twin method, adoption methods. Okay, there are different designs where, because humans, we have limitations of how we can study humans. I'll explain you why is that the case and what are the reasons behind it. So there are studies where we actually select two twins, identical twins, non-identical twins, or twins that are actually reared in different families. Okay, so this is one way of studying humans. And then cytogenetic methods. Cytogenetic method is nothing but studying the cells, like karyotyping, fish methods that we were discussing already in the last part. So I'm going to begin with that part first. So cytogenetic methods, chromosomal and karyotyping analysis. Both chromosomal karyotyping analysis are part of cytogenetics method. If this is cytogenetic method, we have to cover karyotyping and chromosomal. They all three belong to the same area: cytogenetics, chromosomal, and karyotyping. Okay, next, biochemical methods and immunological methods. Biochemical methods means using chemicals that are found in biological systems, like proteins. Okay, some metabolites like phenylketonuria, we heard about phenylalanine, using those type of molecules. That is called biochemical. Immunological, concepts related to immune system functioning and the genetics behind it. How many antibodies we produce, where is this diversity is coming from. There are specific methods that we study under immunological methods. Finally, DNA technology and recombinant DNA methods. So all these are various sets of methods, and with examples we have to learn. And when we are learning about methods, always keep in mind, so when we're talking about method, we have to explain the principle for a method. So what is this method? Karyotyping. What is the principle behind this method? So how does it act? Then we have to briefly learn how is it done? What is the procedure? Because we are learning about the method, right? How is this method performed? And then application, where is it used? Any limitations of it. So these are all the 5 subheadings that you have to focus on. Okay, most importantly, principle, method, applications, and uses, applications and uses, issues. Okay, right. So this is how the structure will be for it. So first of all, let's begin understanding, so what is the importance of human genetics? Importance of human genetics, a brief introduction I will give you, and then we'll talk about cytogenetics part first. Excuse me. I'm sharing the document that I will send you after the class today. I made a brief summary, okay, on these components connecting to what we were already studying.
Sir, just to confirm once more,
Sure.
we have test on 1.4 and 9.3, right?
Yes, we have tests on 1.4, that is evolution part, and the population genetics part. Correct. You're absolutely right. And yesterday we had a good discussion about it. So two of the students actually expressed that they want to write the test Sunday morning so that we won't disturb the class. And I heard your test on the weekend got postponed. Correct? Or yeah. So the test is going to be moved on to Sunday. If it doesn't work for you, I don't mind giving you question paper to those people who plan to write it on Friday. That's all right. Okay, if not, Sunday morning. So I can post it in the Sunday morning and you submit it on Sunday. So we will have as usual classes on Saturday and Monday. Okay, but yes, you are absolutely right. So connected units, okay, because evolution, we talk about many evolutionary factors, which we anyway also discuss as part of the population genetics. So we cover 9.3 as well as 1.4 together. Okay, right. So yes, I think let's start with the discussion of importance of human genetics. Right. So methods to study in human genetics, as I was telling you, focus is understanding the approaches that we take to deal with actually many abnormal conditions or various inheritance patterns. Because principles we already learned, right? In Mendelian genetics, we learned of the unit factors, and evolution, we learned how do they actually evolve. But here, our focus is to analyzing them and understanding, right? So, but the problem when compared with what Mendel had done with pea plants, for example, or what Morgan has done on Drosophila, compared to them, humans actually pose certain challenges or certain obstacles to study them. Why? Because we cannot, easily control them. We cannot easily plan the controlled matings, and they have a really, really long generation time. So, because of these issues that I'm going to list, so it is difficult to study humans. So we have to work around these problems, work around these limitations. So that is why we are going to see some methods which are not as convenient as we have seen in Mendelian genetics part, because Mendel clearly grew some plants, he mated them, and he could count the number of progeny, which is not easy, which is not practically possible with humans. Correct? So here what we have done. So first of all, controlled mating. So first, if you want in running notes, make a note of this. What are the challenges or obstacles we face in studying humans? Okay, this is very important. So when question has come, when question is given on this part, first try to mention the obstacles or challenges in studying humans. So what are the challenges in collecting human genetic data? So the first point of this is controlled matings are not possible. So given the bias that happens either for cultural reasons, for other specific reasons, it is difficult to find or perform controlled matings on humans. So they are impractical, basically. But in case of plants, what do we do? Tall plant, heterozygous tall is mated with the homozygous dwarf. Like that, we could control that. Here it is not possible. And the second problem that you need to make a note of is humans have a long generation time. We have a long generation time. Imagine if someone wants to perform the test that Mendel had performed, back cross or test cross, if they have to perform, how many years they have to wait to see the progeny? Our generation time is about 20 years. So it will take forever to actually see the results. And one person's life is not enough to figure out one concept. Correct? Because if they have to see 4 generations, his life is gone. By that time, he mostly dead. Correct? So very difficult because of long generation time. Same thing if you take plants few weeks to few months, we get the next generation. In about 2-3 years, you can actually figure out the concepts in them. Drosophila is also same thing. Few days to weeks, they survive. It's easy to perform experiments and make proper observations, but not possible with humans. They have long generation time. Okay, so this is what I've explained here. Normally, their humans reach reproductive age only after 10 to 14 years after birth, and most humans do not reproduce until they're 18 years of age. So they actually having children will begin only after that, and then they have to wait for 40 years on average just to observe the F2 progeny. Whereas for the Drosophila, you wait for 2 weeks and you get the next progeny. For bacteria, you wait for 20 minutes, you get the next generation. So it is convenient to work with the other organisms, the model organisms, but very difficult with humans. And I'm not sure if you're aware about this or not. Most of the things today we know about humans don't come from human studies. They actually come from animal studies, land studies, microorganism studies. We slowly build the information like that. I have done few tests on humans just to confirm that what we learned in animals is true with humans as well. So most of the studies comes from the model organisms. That is why when you open a book of genetics, most of the times what you're learning about E. coli, bacterial genetics, you learn about plant genetics, Arabidopsis thaliana, a very well-known model organism, or we learn about C. elegans, it's a type of worm. We learn about Drosophila, most important. Even if you see the genetics books, you will see Drosophila image on most of them. So most of our understanding comes from microorganisms or insects or other animals. Okay, this is because of the problems or issues that we have with the studying humans. Okay, the next point. So we talked about controlled matings are not possible and human long generation time. Third point, human family size is generally small. How many children we normally have? In olden days, they used to have about 8, 10, 11, 12, a dozen kids they used to have. Why? They were always worried if, because there was the health consideration point. If they see many of those children who are born to them, they didn't survive. Correct? So they actually to have at least few children left out or few children to survive, they have to have enough children. In those days, they used to have 10 children, at least to have 2, 3 children, who survive. But otherwise today, 2 children, most commonly even one child has become a common theme. So human family size generally is small, and even otherwise, even forget about cultural aspects and having child. Even otherwise, we can give rise to only one child at a time. Rarely we can have 2 children, twins. And rarest of the rare, we may have triplets, quadruplets are also possible. Okay, but otherwise, most of the times we have one child in a pregnancy. A very very rare cases, twins and triplets, quadruplets, etc. So, how many samples you will get from one family? If you want to see their children, you will get one. You have to wait for 4 more children. So to get at least statistical data to start working on something. So getting simple genetic ratios require substantial numbers, which is not possible. If when parents produce only 2 children, it's impossible to detect 3:1 ratio. How do you get 3:1? You need to have at least 4 of them. So it's impossible for us to get that ratio. Similarly, and even in extremely large families with 10 to 15 children, can we get the dihybrid ratio 9:3:3:1 ratio? We need 16 of them. Not possible. So because of these limitations, so what am I trying to tell you here? These are the problems that we have. Then how do we study humans? The next question is, what should we do to study humans then? Can we rely on only animal studies? Can they answer all the questions related to us? We evolved to be different. We are very different from them. We talked about in genomic studies in the last class. Right? What did we learn there in genomic studies? We have learned that we actually require enough sample size and we require to get a specific idea about what genes and what specific characteristics that they have. And some of these genes, although we share 98% and 96% similarity with chimpanzees, even 3 to 4% difference is quite a bit. So we definitely need to have a way to study humans. So this is a brief idea about the challenges associated with studying humans. Any questions on this? Okay. So if this aspect is clear to you, we'll move on to the first method part. Okay, so geneticists have been forced to develop techniques that are uniquely suited to human biology and human culture. So we have to work around these problems, and one such method is very popular and traditional method related to human genetics is cytogenetics. So let's start learning about the cytogenetics part. Excuse me. So what is cytogenetics? So cyto refers to what? Cytology refers to cell. Cytology refers to the study of cell. So cytogenetics is genetics of cell, genetics related to cell. So what do we study here? It's a branch of genetics, or it's a subpart of genetics, where we learn about structural and functional aspects of the cell, especially the chromosomes. When we say cytogenetics, we know that all the instructions related to life is stored in the form of DNA. Correct? You remember that? So in the cell nucleus that we have at the center, and the nucleus contains genetic material. And genetic material is mainly DNA, and in the condensed form during cell division, DNA gives rise to chromosome structures. So if you say chromosomes, if you say DNA, we are referring to the same thing. So when we are talking about cytogenetics, it is study of chromosomes. Although there are a couple of other things that can be done, but most importantly, our focus is on studying the cell and especially the genetic component of the cell, which is DNA or chromosomes. Correct? So, and out of this, so in the when we are planning to are trying to study the structural and functional components of the cell, the most important aspect of it is to know the chromosome number, how many chromosomes that we have in the given cell, and how do they look, what is their appearance. So this is what we do in the karyotyping part. Okay, so counting the chromosome number and also looking at the appearance of the chromosome is what we do here. And plus physical location of genes and chromosomes. Write them as points if you are writing on this. What is included as part of cytogenetics? This is very ill-defined field. Okay, for us in many anthropology books, when I see it, they don't properly define what is cytogenetics. How is it connected to karyotyping? This part is not well addressed. So wherever possible, I'll try to specify that so you can actually make a note of these things. So what do we cover? What is the scope of cytogenetics? The cytogenetics involves study of various things and especially study of chromosomes, study of chromosome number and their appearance. First point you can write, study of chromosome number and their appearance. The second part is physical location of genes and chromosomes. Study of physical location of genes on chromosomes. What is that method called? We already learned about that method. Finding physical location of genes and chromosomes.
Gene mapping.
Gene mapping, right? Gene mapping, right? So that is knowing the location of the genes. Next, chromosomal behavior. Chromosomal behavior. Like non-disjunction, for example. How are they separating from each other? So studying the chromosomal behavior, for example, during cell division. So these things come under cytogenetics part. These things come under cytogenetics part. Okay. But what techniques to learn? So in the syllabus, they separately given cytogenetics, karyotyping. Okay, and they've also specifically mentioned that chromosomal karyotyping analysis, but they are referring to the same concept. There are few techniques that you can write as part of it. If they ask you to write specifically cytogenetics, we have to describe these methods. Otherwise, if they only ask you about studies for studying man, so genetic methods in studying man, if they say only mention karyotyping as part of cytogenetics, we'll talk about twin studies, we'll talk about other areas. I'll tell you towards the end, once we finish discussing these methods, how to choose and what methods to choose. Okay, for a generic question and for a specific question. If you get a specific question on cytogenetics part, what needs to be covered? So there are a few things I'm going to tell you here. So one of them, karyotyping, and especially we'll talk about Giemsa stained or G banded chromosome. Gimsa is a name of stain. Stain in a very general sense is color. Okay, you want to color the chromosomes. Otherwise, chromosomes cannot be easily visible. They don't have any specific feature that we can see. So we have to color them. We have to paint them so that they can appear with specific pattern, banding pattern. Remember karyotyping, we have seen some bands. So those bands are mainly is because of Giemsa stain. Giemsa is the name of the chemical that is used here. Giemsa stain or G-banded stain it is called. Because when you add Giemsa stain, the bands that they produce is called G bands, Giemsa bands. But Giemsa is the name of that stain. Okay, S-T-A-I-N, stain we call it in biology. Stain is a color. Okay, and other cytogenetic methods that we have, not only Giemsa is one of them. There are multiple different methods of staining here, which I'm briefly going to talk about. And then molecular cytogenetics, focusing at the molecular level, like FISH method we talked about in gene mapping, fluorescent in situ hybridization technique we discussed in gene mapping, okay, that one. And also we have something called comparative genome hybridization or genomic hybridization. Okay, these are some methods that can be studied under cytogenetics. Okay, even before that, I'm going to give you a brief idea on a very, very simple cytogenetic method. We'll begin with that, and then we'll move on to karyotyping with Giemsa stain, and then FISH, and then CGH. So this technique is called bar body. Let's start with the first method, which is called bar body. So this is related to bar body detection. I'll tell you what is bar body and how do we detect it. So bar body is nothing but condensed form of X chromosome. Okay, let me first explain you. So bar body, bar refers to name of a scientist. Bar in this B-A-R-R, bar refers to a scientist whose name is Murray Barr. He is a cytogeneticist from Canada, and is the first one, was the first one to study bar bodies. So what are bar bodies? Bar bodies are nothing but inactivated X chromosomes. Bar body is an inactivated X chromosome. And why does an X chromosome gets inactivated? Think about it. This is called, this concept is also known as dosage compensation. It is called as dosage compensation. It is called dosage compensation. It is called. Yeah. If you see in this image, you kind of see a cell, okay? But towards the membrane of the cell, you see one dark spot. I'm not sure how well you're able to see this. So this is a cell, okay? And when you see the cell, when you stain them, you can actually see one dark spot here. This dark spot is referred to as bar body. So what is this dark spot? What is the connection to X chromosome? So how many X chromosomes do males have?
One.
One. How many X chromosomes in females?
Two.
Two. So males and females more or less have similar characteristics. There are different secondary sexual characteristics, but otherwise more or less in terms of bodies functioning, we are similar, correct? But why females have two X chromosomes and why males have one X chromosome? And we were talking about this. If there is an extra chromosome, it will have additional problems to us. In trisomic conditions that we talked about, 21 trisomy, Edwards syndrome, Puthout syndrome, and other Turner's, those areas that we've talked about, that we need to have, proper amount of chromosomes. True with X chromosome, having an additional X chromosome can have problems as well. So what scientists have found out that although females receive two X chromosomes, only one of them remains active, another one gets inactivated. So only one of the two X chromosomes received by females is active. What happens to the second one? Second one gets inactivated, forming this structure called bar body. Second one gets inactivated, forming the structure called bar body. Okay, and this technique of identifying a bar body is called or is part of cytogenetic method, a very simple cytogenetic method. Okay, I've explained this in the handout.
So can you please explain it again?
Sure. Right. So bar body is nothing but an inactivated X chromosome. How did I start explaining this? I told you that males have one X chromosome and females have two X chromosomes. Meaning females have one extra dose of all the genes present on that X chromosome. But then females should have something more than what males have. But overall, females look like males in many general physiological features, with few differences. Gender differences are anyway there. But otherwise, we notice that females, although have two X chromosomes and males having one X chromosome, more or less have the similar physiological systems. So meaning there must be something balancing this additional number of chromosomes that females receive. Additional number of X chromosomes that female receives. For that, bar body had shown that one of the two X chromosomes received by the mother are received by female. So two chromosomes out of two, one gets inactivated. One gets inactivated. What do you mean by inactivation? Inactivation means too much of condensation. It actually undergoes so much of condensation. It comes like it gets compacted. That nothing, no enzyme can read it. So it becomes completely compacted. This is a general understanding. There are deviations to that. So it becomes compact. It becomes condensed, thereby getting inactivated. And no products should be in this theoretical sense will be made. Okay, and that a body, when this is compacted, when you add a color to something, think about it. When you add color to something, if there is a compact structure and a loose structure, which one will receive more stain, more color? Compact structure or loose structure? Which one will take more stain, more color?
Loose.
Loose one. Okay, why loose? Loose one. Do others agree with it?
Can you repeat the question, sir?
The question is this: you are trying to color or stain something. Let's say in that material there are loose parts and there are compacted parts. Which one retains more stain? Which one retains more color? The loose one or compacted one?
Compact.
Think about an analogy. Okay, so it's like, let's say you actually have lumps of some dough, let's say lumps of dough and free powder. You are actually flowing some color through it. Which one will hold more color, a lump or loose powder?
Lump.
Lump, because why? Lump actually has a kind of aggregated structure where color can just get trapped. Correct. This is what happens with the bar body as well. If you add a color stain to that, the region that we have seen in the image before attracts more color, takes more color, traps more color. That is how, when we actually stain, you see this body as a thick body. And you have one such bar body that is equal to one inactivated X chromosome. One dot means one inactive X chromosome. Like that, so they can identify where this bar body is to stain. Okay, so this is considered to be a process of dosage compensation, we call compensation of the extra X chromosome. So it got compensated by compacting, forming what is called bar body. Identifying that is part of the cytogenetic method.
Sir, how can the bar body is like uh, relatively big compared to the size of cell? I mean, in comparison, relatively it is big enough. So how can a small chromosome make it such a big patch?
Okay. Okay. Your question is, why do we see such a big dot for a single chromosome?
Right.
Correct. Okay. So it could be because of the compacted pattern. Okay. I don't think so. Normally, what happens? The DNA that we have is so much. So if you stain the cell, whole cell contains the thread-like structures, all of it. In general, cell division, I'm not sure if I have shown you that image, but normally what happens, you will see complete thread-like structures all through the chromosome. And we are talking about, so this is 23 pairs of chromosomes will be present all through the cell. Okay. And of course, when I say all through the cell, I'm referring to just the nucleus portion. So this part that you are seeing here is a nucleus portion of that. The whole thing is nucleus, and cell is as big as this. So that is what is confusing you here. So cell will be as big as this, and we're talking about only the nucleus part. And the chromosome will be spread throughout the nucleus. And we are talking about a small part, small dot of the whole nucleus. So although it is enlarged image, relatively this is a very small dot. But a dot big enough to be visualized under microscope. Okay. So compared to the remaining 23, 22 pairs or 22 and a half pairs of chromosomes, this is very small. So it is relatively, you can put 46 dots in this nucleus approximately. Okay. So this is actually relatively in the same size order that you would expect with the other genes, other chromosomes present in the nucleus. Okay.
So these are found only in females, not in males.
Yes, that is what next I'm coming to. So what is the use of such a method? Is there any benefit of knowing Barr body? What is the benefit of identifying how many Barr bodies are there in a person?
We can find the chromosomal abnormality.
You can find
Super female.
starting with, is it possible by performing Barr body without knowing the person? Let's say you got some samples with you. You performed this this test to identify the Barr body. If you did that test, is it possible to identify the gender of it, whether it is a female sample or a male sample?
Yes.
First thing is gender determination. This method can be used in identifying the sex or gender of an individual. So one benefit, common benefit here, is to identify the gender, especially in the unknown sample case. We can identify whether it's a female or a male. Simple thing. Sometimes it's very important. I don't think we have too many options for that. Let's say that you got a blood sample in the crime scene. You want to know because sometimes identifying whether it's a female's blood or male's blood can actually make life easy for the investigators. Correct? So like that, we can identify the gender or the sex of the individual to whom the sample belongs. Next, as you rightly said, Vishal, abnormalities, chromosomal problems can be identified. In what cases? Super females, for example. How many inactivated X chromosomes will be there in super females? Number of Barr bodies in super females is
2.
1. I'm not able to hear you.
2.
2. Did you say 2?
I said 2, sir. Yeah.
Yes, sir. 2.
XXX condition. Correct? So there will be 2 Barr bodies in it. There will be 2 Barr bodies in it. What about in Turner's case? How many Barr bodies will be present in Turner?
1.
1. Okay. What about other? Vishal?
Sir, I think it will not show anything
Why do you think so?
because Turner's is due to lack of X chromosome, and we need one activated for that female quality. So if the other is also inactivated, then there is no X chromosome.
Exactly. So only additional X chromosome gets inactivated. Turner's is a case where there is only one X. It's not it is. Correct? Only one X is present. So there is no point in inactivating that single X. So whereas in super females, we have a triple dose here. So one X chromosome is enough. So remaining two X chromosomes gets inactivated. So two bar bodies, two dots will be formed. Like that, abnormalities can be studied through the simple staining technique by identifying the bar bodies. Okay, and interestingly, we noticed that this bar body testing was used in 1968 Olympic Games because in that at that time, so some male athletes were trying to show or act like females just to take the advantage in the games. So they decided to just test them through this bar body testing to filter that out or to avoid them, by actually mimicking to the females. So bar body testing had been used in 1968. At that time, few tests were available, so they had to use something that was like this. So bar body testing was also used as an application in this particular scenario.
Sir, won't it Klinefelter syndrome, the person would take benefit of this?
Yeah, but the thing is, how many of them will do it? How many do you find the ratios are smaller? Yes, but they can definitely take the advantage of it. So that is possible, but rare possibility. As we're talking about, it is rare. But you are right. Okay. Just curious, I actually found a very good book which talks about many of these topics in Unit 9.1 because biochemical genetics, immunogenetics was difficult to find the information on. But from my collection that I had in the past, I just found out that it talks about many of the topics that we have in 9.1 nicely. Okay, right. So one thing I would like to tell you here, although we talked about X inactivation and although theoretically it may look like the whole X chromosome gets inactivated, okay, and undergoing condensation, more condensation, so that it is become too tight to read it. So if you don't read it, we cannot use it as a genetic information, correct? So that's what happens. But scientists have later identified if that is the case, as we just talked about, as we just uh, kind of found out the numbers. In case of super females, then there should be no problem at all. Super female should be as normal as a normal female if both the extra X chromosomes are inactivated. Correct? So looks like maybe not everything in that X chromosome gets inactivated. So they say that only a small number, although X chromosome gets inactivated, but not all the genes on the X chromosome is inactivated. A small number of the genes escape this type of modification. Okay, and we don't know which one of them. There is no selection. Sometimes students may ask this question: so which chromosome gets inactivated? We have father's X chromosome, mother's X chromosome in female. Which one gets inactivated? There's there seem to be no priority to that. It can be randomly one of them gets inactivated and not all of it. Some genes actually escape from this inactivation process. those few genes which are extra, which are expressed extra in super females, are probably behind the problems that we see in super females. Okay, not all of them gets inactivated, some of them are left out, though some probably would add extra amount of genes and gene products, causing the abnormalities that we see in the super females. Okay, right. This is briefly about the bar body concept. Is it clear? What is bar body? So what is bar body? Bar body is the inactivated extra X chromosome. So where do we normally see it, in males or females? Females will contain bar bodies, not males. Okay, and then, so what happens? How is bar body formed? The bar body is formed through extra condensation or inactivation through condensation. Inactivation through additional condensation. How do you study them? By adding a specific type of color to stain the nucleus, to stain the chromosome. A dotted structure can be seen in the nucleus, especially towards the nuclear membrane. The next thing we talked about is number of bar bodies. Normal females will have how many bar bodies? 1 bar body. Super females have how many bar bodies? 2. Additional, leaving out 1 X chromosome. So rest of the X chromosomes will be inactivated. So always it is number of X chromosomes minus 1. So 3 X chromosomes in super females. So 3 minus 1, 2 bar bodies, 1 normal X chromosome. How many bar bodies are found in males?
None.
0. 1. Correct? So like that. No, so much. Good. That's about bar body technique. And next we'll talk about karyotyping. Okay? This is very, very important method. Karyotyping. So before getting into the details about karyotyping, I would like to walk you through a few thoughts. So you understand the structure of chromosomes, right? So we have at the center of the chromosome, we have centromere, right? We have 2 arms, basically 1 arm of the chromosome. So this is a replicated chromosome or unreplicated chromosome on the left. Replicated or unreplicated chromosome?
Unreplicated.
Unreplicated. So how many arms we have here? 2 arms or 1 arm?
We have 1 arm.
This is 1. Although there is a constriction called centromere, it is altogether 1. What about this on the right hand side? How is it different from this?
It's duplicated.
It's a duplicated chromosome. Okay. DNA got replicated, forming another chromatid. How is this chromatid called now? How are these 2 chromatids called?
Sister chromatids.
Sister chromatids. And this is a very important picture. It takes time for students to understand this. Very good. So you got it. And we have 2 arms, short arm and long arm. Short arm is referred to as P arm for petite, and the long arm for Q arm. So short arm and long. And the ends of the chromosomes are called as telomeres. Ends of the chromosomes are called as telomeres. Telo means tail, tail of the chromosome. Okay. Right. So next, I think I was telling you this in the last class or a class before that. The chromosomes can be categorized into different groups based on where the centromere is. Based on where the centromere is. So let's say if the centromere is at the middle, exactly at the middle of the 2, it is at the middle of this, arm, at the center of this arm. Such a chromosome is called metacentric. Meta is in the sense middle, in the middle. Centromere is in the middle. So based on the position of the centromere, chromosomes can be divided into 4 groups. Based on the position of the centromere, chromosomes can be divided into 4 groups. What are they? Okay, so metacentric means centromere is in the middle. And submetacentric is a chromosome where centromere is away from the center. Centromere is away from the center. Okay. Otherwise, in metacentric chromosome, can you find a P arm and a Q arm? More or less, both the arms are of same size, same length. So it is difficult to find P and Q arms in metacentric chromosome. But submetacentric chromosome, so this top one in this particular case is P arm, this is Q arm. Because centromere moved to one side, it is not at the center. It is called submetacentric. It is called submetacentric chromosome. So metacentric is where centromere is in the center, in the middle. Submetacentric is where centromere is slightly away from the center, either to the top or to the bottom. And the third category is called acrocentric chromosome. Acro, A-C-R-O, centric. Acro means it is towards one end. I think this I mentioned to you in the class before. So acro means towards, it's like moving from the center to one side. Imagine like that. Center, metacentric. Away from center, submetacentric. More closer to the tails. You can still see the tail. A small portion of the tail can be seen on one side. A small P arm can be seen, but this centromere is not at the end. That is called acrocentric. Acrocentric. And the next one, the last one is called telocentric. Can you guess what is telocentric from the image here? Where is the centromere in telocentric?
At the end.
At the end. Only there is no portion of P arm and Q arm here. It is at the tip. This is called telo. Centromere at the tail or at the term, at the end, at the termini. Telocentric it is called. So they only have one arm. So they don't have two sides of the same arm. And we don't have telocentric chromosomes. In humans, we have meta, submeta, and acrocentric chromosomes. Okay, right. So this is important for us to actually understand how karyotyping works. I wanted to introduce this to you. So is it clear what are the 4 different types of chromosomes based on the position of centromere? Okay, right. And this is something I was briefly talking to you before. I just wanted to mention it to you because to understand few aspects of staining, this is important for us. So chromosome, again, the regions in chromosome can be divided into two parts. The regions on chromosome can be divided into two parts. What are they? Euchromatin and heterochromatin. Make a note of these two terms. Within chromosome, the regions that we are seeing here can be divided into two parts. Euchromatin and heterochromatin. Okay, what is the difference between U and heterochromatin? Euchromatin means slightly less condensed region, bit more looser in a way, if you have to say. Okay, so here, what you notice, they are less condensed region as compared to heterochromatin is more condensed, more tightly coiled. If you tightly coil it, that region is called hetero. If it is slightly loosely coiled, it is called euchromatin. Okay, and their location, as you notice here from the image, can you differentiate this pattern here? Loosely coiled and tightly coiled regions from the images here. Can you tell me which of these regions are loosely coiled and which of these regions are tightly coiled?
Telomeres are mostly tightly coiled
Right, very good. And what else?
and around centroid.
That near centromere and telomeric regions are usually contain heterochromatin regions. They are more compacted, they are more condensed. So yes, you are absolutely right. From the image, we can clearly see that telomeres end of the chromosomes and the centromeric region of the chromosomes contain heterochromatin regions. And rest of it, meaning in the middle of the, in between centromere and telomere, this lightly shown regions contain euchromatin or less condensed chromatin region. So this in these regions, what do you notice? If it is, I think I was already giving you a hint on this. If it is heterochromatic, if it is more compacted, is it easy to read the DNA present in there? For the enzymes which perform transcription to convert DNA into messenger RNA or to make copy of information from the DNA and to convert messenger RNA into proteins. Okay, is it easier if it is condensed or if it is loose or less condensed? Which is easier?
If it's loose,
If it's loose. If it is loose, it is easy for them to access and read, correct? So which part of the chromosome will be better expressed? Euchromatin region or heterochromatin region? Expressed means which forms easily proteins.
euchromatin.
Euchromatin, so less condensed, more gene expressive. Here we find the genes that are expressing, that are active, are normally found in the euchromatin region. In the previous case, when we talked about X chromosome inactivation, you know what happens? Will that become euchromatin or heterochromatin X chromosome if it has to be inactivated? If you want to prevent it from expression in the bar body case, if you think that we can switch between U and heterochromatin or vice versa, which chromatin part the bar body will be? Euchromatin part and heterochromatin part?
Heterochromatin.
Euchromatin, because we want to make it inactive, not accessible to the enzymes which perform transcription and translation. So heterochromatinization, it is called sometimes. Heterochromatinization, meaning converting euchromatin region into heterochromatin region. Basically more loosely condensed region into more tightly condensed region. Okay. So euchromatin and heterochromatin. Just be familiar in case if you happen to use these terms, that is enough. I don't think they would ask anything specific on this, but I want to introduce these concepts to you, mainly to understand banding pattern in the next slide. Okay. Otherwise, we don't need to write anything in special related to that. In the syllabus, we don't have anything specific to this. only for understanding some of the steps in the method that we are discussing here. So that is enough. Otherwise, silenced genes, methylated gene poor, gene rich may make it a bit complex for you. So I'm not going to get into those details here, but just mentioning that euchromatin is a less condensed region, heterochromatin is a more condensed region. More gene expression is seen in the euchromatin region and less in the heterochromatin. And in case of X inactivation in bar body formation, the process that is involved may be heterochromatinization. Okay. Good. Excuse me. Can we move on? So next we'll learn about karyotyping. And we already saw images. You are familiar about these images. Let's briefly learn in case if they ask you to write cytogenetic methods or specifically karyotyping, what would you write for a short note? So first of all, you have to explain what is karyotyping, right? This slide nicely talks about it. Karyotyping is a laboratory technique or a method used in analyzing chromosomes. It is a chromosome analysis method, or it's a method used in analysis of chromosomes. Looking for any major chromosomal abnormalities. So karyotyping is a laboratory technique or a method used in analyzing chromosomes in order to look for abnormalities, any major abnormalities in chromosomes. Okay. So what do they do in this? I'm going to explain you briefly. Here the goal in this technique. So how do you create this map? Because as I was telling you, first we have to understand the principle, method, and uses of every method that we are learning as part of in 9.1. So we kind of know the use of this already, right? So how is this diagram made? How is this image made? So basically, I think I already told you, this is a photograph that we are seeing. This is a photograph. We are seeing a photograph, okay, showing metaphase chromosomes, chromosomes that are best seen at metaphase. You remember the cell division stages? Prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase. Metaphase is where maximum condensation of DNA is seen. Because in the prophase, chromosome structures are just beginning to appear. In the metaphase where high condensation happens, and you can see the good great structures, clear structures of chromosomes. As we go on to anaphase, telophase, again they unwind. So to see proper chromosome structures, metaphase is best. That is why they somehow choose metaphase chromosomes. I'll tell you how. Metaphase chromosomes, so that they can clearly see the chromosome and try to pair them, try to organize them to understand if there are any abnormalities. So this image you are seeing here, what type of abnormality are you noticing here? What type of abnormality can be seen in the image here on the right hand side? Any abnormality that you could find here? What can you tell from this karyotype? Sometimes called karyogram, or sometimes ideograms they say. What do you find out from this karyogram?
There is a translocation,
Where do you see it?
X and Y. I'm guessing, but I don't know. I'm not sure.
Acrocentric at 13.
Indeed, it's actually normal karyotype. Just want to see if you find any abnormalities in that. Yes, I think there is some confusion, as you rightly pointed out, 13. But I think that's mostly because of the way the chromosomes are folded. Okay, the extended chromosome, I think the banding pattern has not changed in the same banding pattern, but it's kind of squeezed. There's two dark bands here and one dark band in the center here, and a slightly other portion. We don't have acrocentric chromosomes. Sorry, telocentric chromosomes. So we have acrocentric chromosomes. You're absolutely right. Okay, it's a male or a female?
Male.
Chromosome is always very small. Okay, Y is short, X is big. Okay. So how do we get this image? How do we get to this image? How do we create it? Now let's see briefly the method related to that, and then how this is organized. Okay, so we will understand how karyotyping is done. So this is a brief method related to the karyotyping process. Okay, so procedure wise, if you notice, because principle wise, the idea is to organize chromosomes in a certain order. And how do you get these chromosomes? I'm going to explain the principle once as part of the procedure now. So first of all, let's say that a patient has suffering from any genetic problems or there are indications. Genetic counselor recommended them to get some genetic screening done. Okay, cytogenetic studies done. That is what a person recommended. Okay, a geneticist has recommended, or a genetic counselor has recommended. So what do? You can collect any sample containing cells in that. So blood is the easiest one. So they collected the blood here. Okay, and what they have done? So when you collect the cells, of course, cells usually undergo division, but not necessarily then when you are seeing them, when you're studying them. What do? They actually add a chemical to it. So something called phytohemagglutinin. You don't have to by heart the names. You can simply write to the cells. They add a chemical to stimulate cell division process. To stimulate. So it is kind of forcing them to divide. Why? Because when they divide, we'll get enough options. Correct? So phytohemagglutinin is a name of such a substance extracted from plants usually, okay, which when added to the cells and when you allow the cells to grow, it will result in the cell division process. So cells starting to divide. Okay, after a few days of this, you don't have to write all the details, just the general idea. Sample is collected. It could be blood or it could be like we talked about this in the chromosomal abnormalities, mainly in the genetic screening part. What samples did we learn for prenatal screening? Prenatal screening is done using what type of samples?
Chorionic villi.
Correct. Chorionic villi sample.
And then
Amniocentesis.
amniocentesis.
Correct. That or blood, depending on whether we are testing whether we are performing the prenatal screening or we are performing postnatal screening. Postnatal, no issue, blood is a good choice. Otherwise, amniocentesis or chorionic villi sampling. In either case, you actually add something, a chemical to stimulate the cell division process, grow them for a few days in the proper growth conditions. We normally call these tubes are where animal cells are normally cultured. Okay, this is a medium or a food for cells to grow. And while cells are growing, what do? You add another chemical to it. You add another chemical to it. So what is that chemical? Most commonly, the chemical that is used here is called colchicine. It is called colchicine. So what is the role of colchicine? Colchicine blocks the chromosomes in metaphase. Initially, we added phytohemagglutinin to stimulate the cells to divide. While they are dividing, you add another chemical to stop those cells at metaphase. Why metaphase? I think I already explained you, right? What chromosomes are we preferring here? We prefer metaphase chromosomes. Why? What is the reason behind it, Sunil? Why do we prefer metaphase chromosomes?
Most dense at that stage.
Exactly. Well, they actually form the right chromosome structures easily visible. So we want to stop the cell division there. So you add another chemical, and this chemical normally breaks those spindle fibers. Remember, spindle fibers are thread-like structures which are used in pulling the chromosomes apart. So this colchicine is toxic to those spindle fibers. It breaks them. Meaning even before separation takes place, those strings are broken down. So what happens? Metaphase chromosomes will remain on the center plate. So metaphase chromosomes remain condensed like that. No separation of them take place. That is why they add Golgi cell. And then what do? They take these cells and normally they take a small slide. Have you seen slides? Glass plate, thin glass plate like that. They use for observation under microscopes. You might have seen them in your high school. Okay, so slides are taken like that, and normally they hold the slide like that. And these cells that we have here, they add some amount of salt to it, hypotonic solutions they normally add, so that cells become swollen. Why? Because easy to break them. Our goal is to somehow get the chromosomes out of the cell. So it's like you let them, you feed some water to them. Okay, so they actually gain water like that and they bulge, and you drop the cells like a drop from a tube. You drop it on the slide. What happens when something like that drops onto a slide? It'll open up, it'll break, it'll blast. And when a cell blasts, what happens? Everything inside the cell comes out, including the chromosomes. So they drop the cell on the slide. Okay, after swelling it, then what happens? The chromosomes will spread, and this is the trick. And I remember seeing it in a demonstration class. If you properly drop it, then chromosomes will nicely spread. Otherwise, what happens on the image? Chromosomes will lie on top of each other. So you need a very good spread of the process. This is a very laborious process for that reason. Okay, you have to drop it nicely so that what happens? Chromosomes will nicely spread out. Otherwise, you cannot move the chromosomes later. You just have to be lucky when you drop it and good at dropping that cell. And that's it. You actually have chromosomes will spread. But do you think we can see chromosomes under microscopes if they spread like that? Or do we need to do something for it? Do chromosomes glow themselves? Do they have any glow to them? Or we have to artificially color them for glowing? Sunil, Vishal, any one of you? Or even Yash.
Artificially color them.
Artificially color them because they don't have any natural glow to them. So what do? So once they are dropped like this, okay, once the chromosomes are spread, you give them some color. You stain them. You add them color. The most commonly used stain is called Giemsa stain. As I was telling you, Giemsa is a common stain. And this is what the image you should get after staining with Giemsa. So brief idea, very brief idea is needed here. So suitable sample is taken to begin with, like blood, amniotic fluid, chorionic villi sampling. They are the good samples, depending on what you're trying to do. Then you add a stimulant to start cell division to take place, grow cells, add metaphase inhibitor. Add something like colchicine to inhibit the cell division process at metaphase. And then what do? You add a hypotonic solution or add a solution to cells to bulge so that they can easily break. Then drop them on the slide, and slide will actually, when it drops, it will open up, spreading the chromosomes. To the chromosomes, you add stain or a color, especially Giemsa stain, and now you perform analysis on this. This is how karyotyping works. Can we move on? So this is briefly how the procedure works. I will work brief an idea on this, the last part. So I was telling you, we add some stain called Giemsa stain. Okay. So there are many different stains that are there. Scientists have come up with multiple methods for this. Okay, so I'm going to briefly talk to you about few of them, but these are all old ones, as you notice it. So we're talking about something that happened in 50s, 60s, and 70s, around that period. So about 20 years, about 2 decades of time when these techniques have been developed. Don't have to by heart or know this. Briefly, I'll tell you about the banding patterns. How does it work? So G banding or Giemsa stain banding, how does it work? So in Giemsa stain banding, normally you see the bands like this: dark band, light band. Alternative dark and light bands are seen. Alternative dark and light bands are seen. Okay. So G banding, wherever you see the dark bands, it is heterochromatic region. It is heterochromatin region. I already explained about this. So heterochromatin region is the condensed region, highly condensed region or less condensed region, heterochromatin region.
Highly condensed.
Highly condensed regions take more stain. So the regions that you are seeing here in the images are highly condensed regions. So heterochromatin is stained like that and the euchromatin is stained light in this particular chromosome. Resulting in a banding pattern that you see here. So the idea is this: idea is to develop some patterns for the chromosomes so that you can compare them. Let's say chromosome 1, chromosome 2. So there will be slight modification in how the banding pattern is. So if you create that banding pattern through comparative analysis, it is easy for you to identify whether it's chromosome 1 or chromosome 2. One thing, you can go with the size, and second, you can go with the centromere position. Third, you can go with the banding pattern. So using these three options, one can pair the chromosomes to get the final image that we have talked about.
So if it's heterochromatin in G banding, but in image, the telomeres are shown as light.
Correct. So that actually pattern that we talked about is a general idea about where it is, which may vary. And this is just a representative image. So depending on the source, that it may be different. Depending on the chromosomes also, it is maybe different. I'm not sure if it is visible from this image here. You will see that. So you will see the specific patterns of light, dark, light, dark, light, dark here. And in most of these images, we are seeing the tips being the lighter and the center here it is darker. Okay, so that pattern I think is an average picture that we get, but the pattern seems to be varying from chromosome to chromosome. But a general understanding is that towards the centromere and towards the telomere that we have more of the heterochromatin region. But when we do Giemsa staining, and this is also done after certain treatment, so we add some trypsin, which is a protease that removes the proteins, which also kind of loosens the chromosome structure. So this could be that. Let me check. It is always that we get extra thick bands towards the centromere or the telomeres. I have to check that once. But to me, the pattern is, I think from any of the images, we don't see that pattern. But you're absolutely right. From the general understanding, we should have more of the stain taken by the centromere and telomeres. Okay, let me see why we don't see that in the Giemsa staining that in this particular image. I think, but this image is not wrong. So that is why I'm checking here. So we see similar patterns here. Tips are lighter in many of them, or some of them having darker. So there is definitely variation between chromosomes. Okay, I understood your question. Let me see if I can find an answer to that based on this image. Okay, and then once they add it, they can observe this under microscope to see the pattern. And then you can compare the chromosomes using this GIMSA banding. And GIMSA is the most common form of banding that is used. Okay, right. So briefly, I'll mention you the other types of banding patterns, but if you know about GIMSA, that is more than enough for us. But sometimes there exist different banding methods or different staining methods also exist. Okay, but GIMSA is the common stain, but the way we stain them slightly varies from method to method. So next we'll talk about Q banding. Q is a specific type of fluorescent dye. Q is a name of a dye called quinacridone. Okay, quinacridone. I don't think you need to specify the name or know the name specifically here. Q banding, quinacridone band it is called. So what happens here? A specific type of fluorescent dye is added. So it's called quinacridone mustard. Okay, so what do they do? This fluorescent banding patterns can be seen, which is kind of reverse, as you see, reverse to the GIMSA stain banding. Okay, and for this, to see the fluorescent bands, you have to shine the UV light onto them. You have to shine the UV light onto them. And here, as you are talking about, we can definitely see the pattern that as it is expected for the heterochromatin regions. So centromere is stained dark, tips are stained dark. Let me see what caused that difference in the GIMSA stain. There must be something that is happening in the GIMSA. Okay, that explains this. So quinacridone mustard is another stain that can be used when such a fluorescent dye is used for staining chromosomes. The banding pattern that is produced here is called Q banding. So G banding is this, Q banding is this. The difference here we are seeing is here we use a different dye called quinacridone mustard. Okay, and this can point out few regions better than what G banding can. For our understanding, it doesn't make any difference here because for specific purposes, this banding is of great use. But I want to introduce few types of this banding to you, which are very commonly discussed in the literature. So the next one I would like to tell you here a bit more simpler is R banding or reverse banding. So this is also GIMSA stained, but you see here, there is an opposite scenario with R banding that is called reverse to GIMSA. This is called reverse R banding or reverse banding. This is reverse to GIMSA. So those that are stained darker in the G banding will look lighter here and vice versa. How does that work? First, before staining them, they apply some heat to these chromosomes. They heat this metaphase spreads. So what happens? Heat will release the chromosomes. The regions which were lighter before will become darker after staining. So the difference is how they actually treat it. So initially they treat it with heat here. So heat will result in denaturation or meaning opening or loosening of the regions. And then they stain it with GIMSA. Okay, and the banding looks reverse to what we have seen before because there is a kind of an uncoiling that happens in those regions and some sort of semi-coiling in the other regions. So the banding pattern is called a reverse banding pattern. Okay, the last one is C banding. C refers to centromere banding. C refers to centromere. So what do? They actually do some sort of treatment to this, to the arms part of it, but leaving the centromeres. If you want to identify the specific location of the centromere, this banding method is better. This banding method is used. Here also they again use the GIMSA stain, but the difference here is they actually chemically treat the arms, leaving the centromere. So centromere receives the band. Centromere receives the stain. Thereby, what do you see in this image? Only centromeric portion gets stained. So identifying the centromeric region is the key idea here. Okay, so identifying centromere in C banding, R banding or reverse banding by heating, which gives opposite pattern to the G banding, and a Q banding where we use quinacridone mustard, a fluorescent dye to highlight few regions that G banding probably cannot. And then G banding is a generic method where Giemsa stain is used to provide some specific pattern. So why we need pattern? With pattern, we can actually pair the chromosomes right. Size and pattern can be used organizing the chromosomes. That is how G banding is done. So this is how staining works in the karyotyping method. So just briefly have an idea about this staining part. Otherwise, the most important aspect is this. The last part is this in the karyotyping. So first of all, I told you we have done this. We have done those steps that we already discussed about. So on now we have all the chromosomes that are spread. You know what they do after that? They take a picture of that. They take a picture of that chromosome at this step. After the spreading of them, after the staining of them, they take a picture. Now, what do they do? Individual chromosomes are cut. They remove the individual chromosomes with scissors. The last part, what are we learning here? So we have the chromosome that got spread. You take a picture of it because individual chromosomes we cannot organize in reality. So what do we have to do? You take a picture of it, and the picture can be taken to cut the individual chromosomes, and then you organize them. How do you organize? The individual chromosomes are organized according to their size and banding pattern. And I just told you there are different ways of staining them to create the banding methods. So Giemsa being the most common method of them. Next, what do they do? The larger chromosomes, out of all 23 pairs of chromosomes, large chromosomes, about 1 to 5 chromosomes are arranged on the top row. The top row normally contains like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 you see here. So can you see that these chromosomes are the largest of the remaining chromosomes in the karyogram? So these are the largest. So they go in the descending order, the largest to the smallest. The first few of the chromosomes that you see here, they're going from the largest to the smallest chromosomes. The larger chromosomes are arranged on the top, and in the descending order of size, we organize the remaining chromosomes in few more rows. And once we finish organizing all 22 autosomes, 22 pairs of autosomes, the last ones will be allosomes or sex chromosomes. So here X chromosome and Y chromosomes, they are not organized based on the size. Otherwise, this chromosome should come somewhere here. X chromosome should come somewhere here. But what do? 22 autosomes are organized first based on their size in the descending order. Then X and Y chromosomes are organized. Like that, this is a method of creating a karyogram using karyotyping method. So are you with me on this? Can you briefly explain if they ask you to write a short note on karyotyping? What is karyotyping? What is a principle? So principle, we learned that we're actually creating a specific patterns for each chromosome sets by staining them so that it is easier for pairing them or organizing them. Okay, and how are we organizing? There are certain rules for this. You organize from in the descending order. The largest ones will be on the top, smallest one will be at the bottom. And first you organize the autosomes, then the allosomes. And imagine with no staining, is it easy? If you just go with the size of the chromosomes, sometimes they fold. We have seen in some karyograms, they actually fold like that. So it is very difficult to understand their length. If you have banding pattern, so using banding pattern, one band here, another band here, another thick band here, you will clearly know the banding patterns here, right? Pick up any image, you can roughly see that the banding pattern is comparable. Like that, they ensure to properly organize these chromosomes. And this is one of the best karyotypes you can find on the image that you see here. Nicely organized and pretty visible. This is how karyogram is obtained through the karyotyping method. And we can analyze their size, their structures, their number. These are all the things we can analyze. I'm going to talk to you the applications of karyotyping next. Uses of karyotyping or applications of karyotyping. Okay, and majority of these points we already discussed in the class, but I'll just briefly list them out. Okay, so genetic counselors. So applications of karyotyping, you can see that genetic counselors, they use karyotyping to diagnose abnormal pregnancies. Genetic counselors can suggest karyotyping where needed. Correct, we talked about that already, because karyotyping reveals the anomalies, chromosomal anomalies or chromosomal abnormalities. And we already talked about this as well. Amniocentesis is a procedure that is normally used. Amniocentesis or chorionic villi sampling is used in prenatal screening for such an analysis. Okay, just look at the applications. You know them already. We have already talked about them, and I'm going to share this document with you after the class. Then you can just give it a quick read. So useful for diagnosis of abnormal pregnancies. The next one is helpful in certain cases to obtain karyotypes from parents to determine carrier status. Okay, someone is suffering from the miscarriages, frequent miscarriages, so problems with pregnancies. So what can they do? Whether they can check whether that she is a carrier for certain problems. So if they're suspecting that a person is a carrier for certain problems, similar karyotyping can be allowed. So both of them can come as part of the genetic counselor's work. And similarly, karyotyping may be used sometimes to understand why some people are infertile. Of course, hormonal and other issues they may look into. In addition to that, if they don't have clues from the hormonal problems, they may even go for performing karyotyping to check if there are any problems in their chromosomes indicating their infertility issues. To figure out what's causing infertility, one method that they use is also karyotyping. If there are, just to see any genetic problems that they have in their chromosomes that are visible. And next, karyotypes can be used in diagnosis of cancers. Then we talked about, I showed you karyotyping in translocation process, right? Okay, CML, leukemia, particularly we talked about. So translocation, if it is nicely visible, sometimes it is difficult from karyotyping. We need advanced karyotyping methods like fish-like methods are needed, or sky methods are needed for karyotyping. But otherwise, you can look for the reasons behind cancers happening in the families. Okay. So prenatal screening, carrier screening, finding causes for the reproductive problems, and diagnosing cancers. And even in gene mapping, sometimes we can use cytogenetic techniques to assign and localize, identify the localization of genes to chromosomes. Finally, at the population level, sometimes we can use karyotyping to see if someone who got exposed to some toxins, if they are showing some abnormalities. People living near nuclear reactors, for example, are people who are the victims in the Bhopal disaster, Bhopal gas tragedy that happened, where a toxin called methyl isocyanate had caused some genetic abnormalities in people living there. In those cases, because of environmental exposure to toxins, okay, can be checked using karyotyping process. So beforehand, they can diagnose if they have any specific problems and try to manage the problem or try to mentally prepare for that problem. So like that, these are all the various sets of examples for karyotyping process. So if it is for a short note, if they're not asking for just karyotyping, don't write about all of them. Write about diagnosing abnormalities, genetic abnormalities, chromosomal abnormalities, translocations like translocations in cancers. Write these key points. But if they're asking for specifically karyotyping, I've given enough points for you to write here. So are there any limitations of karyotyping? So I think must be clear from the method that we discussed. Karyotyping is a labor intensive process, a laborious process, lot of steps, lot of work, and proper skill is required for this. So proper training is required. So labor intensive procedure in all the steps that we talked about, treating the cells, multiplying them, adding chemicals, causing rupture of the cell, staining, a laborious process, take a couple of days at least. So laborious is one limitation. Second limitation is errors. Humans can make mistakes. When you're identifying, when you're pairing the chromosomes, if the spread is not good, it is sometimes difficult to find the right pair. So arrangement of chromosomes in preparing karyogram may end up having some human errors. The next one is resolution of the image. The light microscopes are not great. You may not clearly see the image. So light microscopes have limitation of how good images they can show. So resolution of the image can be a problem. Okay, so poor resolution. If you want to write poor resolution of microscopes, light microscopes. Because of this poor resolution, small changes are difficult to be identified. Big changes you can see as I was talking to you, small deletions, small inversions, they may not be identified easily. Okay, bigger problems, bigger translocations, those type of things are possible with karyotyping. Otherwise, some advanced methods in karyotyping are needed. Okay, but nowadays some advancements are seen to address the problem with the resolution part. So we have a variation for our advancement in the karyotyping has been introduced. This is called spectral karyotyping, or SKY. In short, this can be called as SKY method or spectral karyotyping method. So what do they do here? What do you notice here different from the traditional karyotype compared to this karyotype? What do you see different here?
So it is colorful.
Colorful, right? Easy to identify. So you see that specific chromosomes are colored differently. Two homologous chromosomes are colored yellow here, or reddish here, bluish here, greenish here, purple. Like that, chromosomes are colored with different stains. Okay, not differently. Sorry, not different stains, but different labels, different fluorescent dyes. So colorful dyes or fluorescent dyes. And it is easy to detect. When you do this, easy to detect. So because of the colored combinations here, you can identify. Doesn't matter if chromosome 5 is here, you will not match it with the chromosome 11, let's say. Because of the color patterns, the mistakes, human errors can be minimized here. Okay, this is one advancement that happened in the last 2 decades time. Okay, so given that we are able to add specific color to each chromosome, even small problems like translocations or multiple chromosomes having problems can be easily identified. So resolution is better because of the coloration here. Resolution is better, and this is called spectral karyotyping. Spectrum means different colors, the different wavelengths. We say wavelength spectrum. We say it is a range. So spectral karyotyping is.
Would they be using a normal light microscope or a spectrometer?
For that, they have to use. They don't use spectrophotometer for this. They have to use microscopes which can actually identify the colors. In the sense, the microscope should have some form of color development ability. Okay, so they have to be better than simple light microscopes. And computers. So what do? They automate this process in a way. They're connected to computers and they use softwares for organizing this. No need for the manual method that we talked about, cutting the papers. Nowadays, they have computer programs which can organize the information based on the color and present something that is more useful to us by reducing human errors. Okay, like this. So don't worry about the entire method. The whole essence is important because you won't be able to remember all these details. And as this is just an extension to karyotyping, the method I described is enough. This is just a new addition to it. So colors can be identified like this. Computers, programs can analyze how much of each color, where is it located. So you can classify them from the mixture like this and nicely organize. And any abnormality, if a red portion from chromosome 2 is switched to a region on the green here, okay, this is the 10th or 11th chromosome, you can clearly see the difference. Right? The colors switch, you know which region went where. So translocations, even small problems in the chromosomes can be identified easily with spectral karyotyping. Okay. Right. So the next method is something that we already discussed in gene mapping class. Okay, so this is easy. Just the concept is easy. Just want to quickly show you that information. So cytogenetic method. So fish method, fluorescent in situ hybridization method or fish method. Do you remember how does fish work that we discussed in the gene mapping method? So here, two things that you have to remember. Fish refers to fluorescent tag attached to a probe. Right? Remember, I was talking to you a complementary sequence. Let's say you want to identify a particular region on the chromosome. You have to create complementary sequence to the target region. You have to create complementary region to that target sequence and add a fluorescent tag to that. So what happens, this region will bind to the chromosome and wherever it binds, it will glow. So specifically, you are using a sequence that is complementary to the region on the chromosome and which glows. So which is added fluorescent dye to it. So it glows. Like that specific sequences on the chromosomes can be identified. So this is what we learned in the gene mapping process. But here you may be interested in few regions which undergo translocation. Few regions where mutations are possible. So you know what regions you are looking for and then make a complementary sequence, add a fluorescent tag to that, thereby allowing it to glow. That is called fluorescent in situ hybridization. I think I've also shown you the images, right? In gene mapping, we talked about order. In the last class, we talked about the order of genes. Green colored, red colored, white color regions we talked about. Okay, so that is fish. So fish is the method which is more precise. In the previous examples of sky or even in the karyotyping, we talked about random banding patterns. Right? But fish is more precise and more targeted because you look for a specific sequence in the chromosome. So it is definitely better than conventional chromosome staining methods. So, and I already explained you this, the probes are attached to the molecules that fluoresce or that glow and producing color, which is precisely where the probe binds. So we know exactly where probe is binding, that is where color is seen. So in a way, fish can be used to paint the entire karyotypes. Like that, you can create many probes for several regions on the chromosome. What happens? You will actually highlight several regions and identify the order of all of those regions. So this is exactly what we learned in the gene mapping process. So in the end, what happens? Once you add several probes to that, I'm going to show you the image on this. So you take computer which integrates the images and shows you specific regions which you can after analysis find out if there is any problem with those regions. Okay, for example, I'll show you this image. So colors are added like this. Okay, so some of these you can see the tips, green colored tips can be seen here. Okay, and in this particular case, chromosomes, some chromosomes are labeled to be bright green, like you choose what color that you want to add, identifying a specific region of the chromosome. Thereby, we can actually view and identify chromosomes that otherwise with karyotyping are not visible. So you can target those specific regions which are not properly stained in the karyotyping process. So with cytogenetic method of fish, we can identify and highlight those specific regions. In this particular image, you can clearly see how useful is fish. So this is the normal chromosome types. Few chromosomes are orange, some are red. What do you see here in the abnormal translocation cases? If you notice on the arrow marks, you see the mixture of red and yellow colors. Red and yellow colors. What are they indicating? They're indicating the translocation process. So normal karyotyping, it is very difficult to identify the process like translocation, genetic chromosomal abnormality like translocation, but here you can. Because fish now clearly looking for this region where you have mixture of colors. Mixture of colors means two different chromosomes got fused, which is a result of translocation process. Okay, like that fish can be used. So in the cytogenetic method, so far we talked about karyotyping, spectral karyotyping, and we also talked about fluorescent hybridization. Fluorescent hybridization. So we'll stop the class here. In tomorrow's class, we are going to focus on the last method, which is in cytogenetic method, we are going to talk about the comparative genomic hybridization. That is the last topic that we are going to discuss as part of the cytogenetics. So otherwise, we talked about bar body, karyotyping, spectral karyotyping, and the fish method, leaving out the comparative genomic hybridization. So with that, we'll finish talking about the cytogenetics part. So tomorrow, I'm planning to begin with the pedigree part or twin part. So most likely I'll finish pedigree part, which we can correlate with the topic we just finished, that is chromosomal abnormalities. Then we move on to the twin studies and the remaining topics. Okay. See the image like this. So if you use something like a different colors for identifying different regions, this is how nicely the banding can look like in this image. So nowadays advancements are happening in this field where chromosomes can be very specifically and particularly stained. So there is no way, and even manual allocation or arrangement is not needed. So computers can do this, computer programs can do this. Okay, so this is the advancement that are happening. Definitely cytogenetics is playing a big role, especially in understanding genetic abnormalities and chromosomal abnormalities in people.
Are these techniques more laborious than normal karyotyping, since they need to kind of open the DNA to know the sequence?
No. Compared to the regular karyotyping, these methods are less laborious. You know why? Because the overall method is same. I think extracting the chromosomes nowadays, I think companies are making some sort of mixtures of solutions. So what happens? You add them, cells will open up, and to the chromosomes you add the dye and stain, which may take a few minutes to few hours. Okay, and then it's a matter of presenting it on the computer. So any device which actually deals with these chromosomes and adds the stain to them, computer can itself make the analysis on. So they should be less laborious and more specific compared to the traditional karyotyping methods. Karyotyping traditional methods are more laborious. Okay, that is what the focus, right? So this is what we want to do. We want to develop them, and you want to make them more accurate. Okay. Any questions from what we discussed today? So this document I'm going to share with you. Go through it and see if you have any difficulties or problems anywhere. And prepare like this, as if they're going to ask a short note on this. Cytogenetics, short note. What do you do there? So brief idea about karyotyping, and karyotyping should be our major focus on this. And then new advancements, fish method and spectral karyotyping. Bar body is just to add, the diversity to the cytogenetic topics. Okay, but simple and a very old technology is that. Right.
Thank you.
Bye guys. So we'll have a class tomorrow. I'll send you the link before the class. Bye.